Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. So let me give you what I'm going to call the case for life in the universe, especially in your galaxy. Humanity on this globe called Earth has not been here that long. You see, this galaxy in particular is quite old. Some of your scientists would say it's 13 billion years. And in the creation of that, this planet itself, before it ever cooled down and started to be habitable by even the microbes 4 billion years ago. And then it began. And what is here also occurred all over the galaxy for the same reasons. And what I mean by that is the creation of life is absolutely normal in any galaxy. And this is the one we're talking about. The creation of life is natural. It happens with natural amino acids, chemistry, electricity that is all present all over the galaxy. In billions of planets, many of them just like this one. And that which you call the habitable zone. A place that you're familiar with. So I paint this picture that all over the galaxy, just like here, life was potentially possible and began its creation. As the microbes, as evolution, and it did here as well. But here was different. Life as you know it today, which is the cycle that you experience today with photosynthesis, which allows oxygen to be created by the plants and carbon dioxide to be then distributed. This balance didn't happen very quickly. Some scientists say that there were 5 starts to life that they can track by looking at the dirt, by looking at the rocks, by looking at all of the things that they look at. There were actually more than 5 that didn't take and had to start again. And a start of life doesn't simply happen again. Sometimes 1 million years will go by before the elements will combine. And so it went on this planet. But at the same time, where those were starting and stopping and starting and stopping, there were many planets, hundreds of thousands of them, where it took the first time. And so while dinosaurs were still roaming around, about yet to be destroyed, there were massive civilizations all over your galaxy, just like you, looking like you, with DNA like yours, a little different. Civilizations, intelligence, duality, all of the things that you have. Millions of years before you got it. This life called humanity, right now, with the spark of God inside you, with a consciousness that knows who God is only 200,000 years old. I'll say it again. You are the new kids on the block. This galaxy is teeming with life. And it's life that is far, far older than yours. And some of that life, not more advanced, but a lot more evolved in consciousness. This is the case for life. Even your scientists will admit there has to be life, even in your own galaxy, for they're finding the elements in deep space. Now there is the acknowledgement. It's probably everywhere. And they're right. There's reasons why they have not come to this planet. landed on the White House lawn and said, "We're here." But the premise is set. Is it possible that civilizations with millions of years a head start on the evolution of consciousness, including the concept of the Creator inside, with them having the same kinds of attributes you do, who are born magnificent, had to go through their times and their wars and their duality and their experiences, that some made it and some didn't, but enough did, so that the universe is looking at you, the new kids on the block. I said to Yah-E, it's time. Sing the tones now at the precession of the equinox, and tell them you're awake. And tell them you know they're here too, because you're going to sing pineal tones that are from their place, the Pleiadians. And when they recognize it and when they hear it, there's going to be a lot of applause. They made it. They made it. This is why you're here. To continue this legacy, as odd and strange and eye-rolling as it might be to so many. There'll come a day when the eye-rolling stops and they land on the White House lawn. As well as so many other places. And I will tell you something, that when that occurs, no one will be surprised. And so we continue. I want to talk a little more about who's here. About Lemuria in particular. Things that I have taught mostly to women in the past, you need to hear now. First of all, you might be aware that some of the tones and the noises that you've been singing and saying have an overtone quality that broaches that which can be seen by those who listen to interdimensional things. So I'd like to acknowledge the fact that Lemuria was real. And it was a training place, mostly, of the nodes of this planet where the Pleiadians land and the star mothers started to give birth. Lemuria, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, was unique. And that is because it was isolated. And for thousands of years could continue undisturbed. No other civilization, no matter how long you were there, with incarnates already starting on the planet, no one would come to the islands. And so Lemuria became the place of higher teaching. And what I want to tell you, that I've said so many times to others, is that the star mothers taught the women different than the men. And the reasoning was this, that the women are far better equipped to be the shamans and the teachers on this planet. And the reasoning here should be obvious to every mother and to every father. The women have a greater intuitive sense. They are raising the children. They have the love and the compassion and the patience. And that is what is needed to teach that magnificence of God inside, of the Creator. The women carry the torch of shamanship, of the teachers of divinity. And you come to a place in this society now and you see what your duality has done. Because it's reversed. How do you like it so far? It hasn't worked. Not really. Not really. I want you to look around, dear ones, in this group. Your Akash is awakening to these choirs. And for these years, if you were to take the pictures of who is attending, it's mostly women. You are awakening, Lemurian ladies, as well as those who were there as men, But more women are awakening than men because that is the seed that was given to you then. And here was the seed. That should you choose, as a civilization called humanity, the seeds would start to awaken. The shamanship that was taught to you, the beauty of God, the pieces and the parts of the Lemurian teaching wheel, all of these things will start popping out. The intuition is the key. And that is why there are so many more women involved. And they were trained so that when they awoke at a certain point, many of them would see things they were not ready to see. And one of the things that surprised perhaps some of you who were drawn here originally, or perhaps even today, or even this week, is how it resounds to you. How does it feel? And so many of you who have been in the choirs from the very beginning have traveled the world to be on the nodes and sing the tunes, and you wouldn't miss it. And the reasoning here is that, again, it is built into your Akash, this awakening. And as these nodes start to open and activate and spread what they are doing, and I'll get to that, you are responding. It's almost like your Akash and your pineal are antennas. And they draw you to this room where you learn tunes that nobody has sung before. Odd kinds of sounds that nobody has made before. Putting them together in a scenario of timing that is odd to some, that no one has done before. And while you do it, some of you have the healing of your life. And I'm not talking about the physical healing as much as I am about the consciousness of peace, where you start to realize the importance of who you are at this time on the planet. What you might do as an old soul, even after the choirs are finished. Lemuria became the birthplace of the old souls on the planet who have the most intuition of awakening. That's who's here. There are many who would love to be here, who don't have the resources to be here, who will listen as best they can to the tones, and they'll be right with you. Multidimensionality is that way. When you get into a dimensionality that is beyond that which you expect on a day-by-day basis, funny things happen. And those funny things are a timelessness, a feeling that perhaps you are there when you're not. There will be those who are not here now, who will hear these channelings and perhaps the tones, and they will be here. Hard for you to understand about the future and the past and how they may not relate in a multidimensional field like they relate in a three-dimensional one. Imagine for a moment that those later who would listen to the channelings are here now. And how many would there be? Where would they sit? And so I tell you to stretch that, not which is just your imagination, but which is your reality, into something that is beyond that which is three-dimensional. There's an entourage here right now from the stars. And they don't sit in the back. They sit on your lap. And some of you feel it. Some of you feel the reality of what you're doing. Beyond having a good time with other light workers and old souls. This is the profundity of the old soul. Led by a master old soul called Yai, who is awakening to even greater purpose as I speak. who has much more science to give this planet, even after the choirs are gone. Dear ones, this is a new time. This is a new era. And this planet is starting to awaken to concepts of integrity that it never had before, transparency that it never had before. And you're at the center of it. You're in the right place at the right time. There have been those who would ask about the signal, if you call it that. I told you that this particular event awakened those from the stars that you had made it past a point that was prophesied to be the end of humanity. There are some seniors who can remember the prophecies that said you would not make it, who might have lived through part of the Cold War, where 50,000 nuclear weapons were pointed at one another. Those were the times when some humans were absolutely sure they would not survive. Because like all of the civilization before, another war would occur and another one and another one, but the one that would occur would be nuclear. And that would be the end. There was prophecy even in certain sacred scriptures that said you wouldn't make it. And it all targeted 12 years before the choir. Now that's a significant number, and I'll tell you about it in just a moment. But it was centered around the year 2000. 2000 flew by. And the only problems you had, even those weren't real. Y2K, if some of you remember. And you survived. And there was no war. Sometime before that, there were even celebrations of those who felt it coming. Who said that it's in the field. And that field represents the consciousness of a future humanity. Things that are coming. That target themselves in the field that you can feel because the consciousness is beginning to awaken. And you passed that place they said you'd never pass. And 12 years later, in Hawaii, Lemuria, on Maui, so many of you gathered to sing the basic tones, the first ones, and sent a signal. As many times as we've told you about that, it seems that it's still magic. It's a mystery to some how such a thing could ever be. We started this day telling you that the life in this galaxy is abundant. Much of it has high consciousness. Places where you are only dreaming of going someplace. With an ascended body, perhaps. They're here. They live in the galaxy and they're aware of you, and some of them created your DNA. What was the signal? There are those who always ask, why do we have to do it again? If that one choir was enough and we sent the signal, why do we have to have more choirs? I'm answering that now. That signal was a wake-up. It's a signal that they weren't necessarily waiting for. Because for eons, this civilization called humanity always had only war, if you noticed. War after war, and it seemed like the Akash of the human being never remembered the horror of the last war. And new humans would show up and almost like they never knew that what it was like to burn their hand, they had to do it again. And then they had to do it again. And then they had to do it again. This is an earmark of low consciousness. You were almost written off, dear ones. Here is another one that wouldn't make it. The Creator gives you free will. Absolute and total free will. There's no intervention if you wish to take it to its lowest ebb. That's free will. That's the love of God, giving you choice. But you sent the signal, and there was more than awakening. Dear ones, there was surprise. And in that, I'll tell you, if you want to call it meetings, go ahead. There was a confluence of energy in this galaxy that recognized that another planet was about to go into ascension. And it might take another few thousand years before they got there. But they were now echoing the same steps that so many of the planets had done before. They saw the consciousness start to raise. So much, though, that 900 of you gathered in one place and sang to the stars, "We made it." It was a surprise. Why do you have to keep singing? The reason is this. You need to have the old tones that were sung 8 years ago, 7 years ago, continue. So that they know that it was not a flash in the pan. That you didn't then destroy yourselves a couple of years later. And you continue. And the tones you sing are more elaborate, coming from the pineal, right from the Star Mothers, who taught them to Ya'i. Taught them to Ya'i so that when these days came, he'd remember them. And he'd put them forward. The signal you've given is, "We're still here." And another choir, "We're still here." And another choir. And the tones become more elaborate. And it says something beyond a signal to those from the stars who have been waiting for you to awaken. And join perhaps a galactic group eventually that has a purpose that I've only hinted about. Is it possible that this galaxy has a measured vibration when it comes to high or low consciousness? And if it had a measurement of high or low consciousness, who cares? Who's watching? Who's listening? The universe, dear ones, is very big. Your galaxy is very large. What if I told you that the consciousness of your galaxy is an important measurement to how things go in the universe with free choice of others you'll never meet? And if that's the case, this planet starts to add to a raising consciousness of the entire group of planets. The tens of thousands of them with ascended beings who are looking at you and watching you and saying, "Good job, Pleiadian." What if? What happens here next in the raising of the consciousness of this planet changes the entire galaxy's quotient? Do you think that would matter? I'll tell you, it really matters. So you continue to send the signals, including the one today, that not only says we're still here, but we're now starting to sing more elaborate things like victory songs and lullabies that go beyond open fifths and are more complicated because we're evolving. And every time you sing, including this day, every time you do it, there's an entourage which comes to hear it. It's so special, dear ones. You have no idea what you've done. This planet is more protected today than it ever was before. I'm not going to go into it except to say not all the life is ascended. And they know you're here too. You have a bubble around you of beautiful ascended beings who know about your Pleiadian DNA and who want this planet to survive and to ascend in consciousness to help this galaxy. You've been noticed. Now I have something to tell you that I will elaborate on a little more this day. You've only sent awakening signals that say, we're here. There really has not been a language past the fact that we're here and we're still here and we're a little more awake than we were the last time. It's like the mother in the other room wondering whether her child is alive or not for some reason, perhaps in a scenario, and suddenly she hears that voice of her child in the other room and she says, thank God you're alive, and goes in the other room to see what the child is going to say, and the child says, blah, 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 blah. Drip, zip. Yahweh's assignment is going to be about saying more than that. You'll see in a bit, because there has a language. On the last choir, you're going to tell them you know what's up. I want to give you a message from a Pleiadian. Those from the stars teach in metaphors. It's very difficult for an ascended being of any kind to teach in a way that a three-dimensional teacher would teach. And the reason is because the concepts of God are far beyond any language in the room. And so this is the story that the Pleiadians want you to hear today. A man walks into a field. He's been climbing a mountain for a while, and it's a beautiful place. Lovely day. He's a very intelligent man. He's a man of the world, ordinary. Has a good job. And the unexpected takes place. He sees what only could be described as an apparition. If you tried to take a picture of it, you couldn't. It wouldn't register. It's almost like a ball of spinning translucent light. It's astonishing. And he knows he's seeing something that is beyond that which is three-dimensional, but he doesn't fear it, for it feels so comforting. It starts to take shape in his mind. And I say that because that which is his mind that registers and goes through all the synapse of what is this, will then come to the conclusion it must be angelic. And so that form starts to take shape as a beautiful woman, angelic in form, shining like the sun. The man has gone to church most of his life. He's ready for this. he takes off his shoes. Because he knows he's in the presence of something beautiful. Something from God. And it stands before him and it spins before him in the field. Pretty soon he gets up the courage, besides just staring at it, to speak. And he says, "Can you hear me?" And this glorious voice that he hears in his mind, not from the air, not through his ears, that's so soothing and female, of course, because the angel was, says, "I hear you." And the man says, "What are you?" And the apparition says, "I'm anything you want me to be, sir." Intelligent he is, and wise. And so he says to the apparition, "I believe you to be an angel. Please, though, tell me what you are, not what my imagination says you are." So he's thinking past that, which is the perception of his mind. And the apparition says, "I am not an angel. I'm from the stars." A man says, "You are from the stars." And she says, "I am a Pleiadian star mother." He doesn't know what that means. He only feels the sacredness of it. He cannot doubt the sacredness of it or the reality of it if it spins before him and he stares at the multicolors. And he realizes that he's looking at something completely different than any reality he's ever had. Why does it emanate such love? How is it that he can feel it in every cell of his body? And now, this is telling him it's not even angelic, it's an E.T. And he says, "Can you tell me things?" And she says, "Of course." "Where are you from?" Even though the apparition, she has said she is a Pleiadian star mother, he's not really got it yet. "Where are you from?" And the answer may surprise you. She says, "I'm from Seoul. I live here." "You live here?" he said. And she says, "I've been here for thousands of years." He didn't ask much more about that because he saw the opportunity in his own mind to ask questions of this wonderful creature who is sending out all of this vibration and love. And he says, "I may not have this for long. I want to ask questions that are meaningful. I want to know how things work." And so he begins. "Will you tell me the truth if I ask you questions that are burning in me?" And she says, "Of course." And so he starts to ask a series of questions. And the first one is this: "I've always wondered about anti-gravity. Can you tell me, does it exist and how does it work?" The star mother is now becoming a little more visible. You can see her face. You can see the beauty, how big she is. You can start to hear a voice in the air now and not in his head. It's a voice he'll never forget all of his life, caused by a different kind of vocal cord, one in two sections, one that might even be able to sing open fifths by itself. And she says, "The love of God is beyond anything you can ever imagine. The love of God contains the compassion of the universe, and all the creatures that are within it are known. The love of God is dripping with truth and transparency. The love of God knows who you are. And the man realized as she was speaking, that's not the answer he was looking for. He tried again and he asked another question, this time not about physics, but about government. What is the best kind? What is going to be next? What kind of a leader should we look for? And she says the love of God is the most spectacular energy imaginable. It flows through every cell of your body. It's such a liquid that greets every cell, that loves every cell. The love of God knows every blade of grass and every bit of life on this planet. There is nothing like the love of God. And then she starts to ask him a question. Tell me, sir, do you have children? And he says, I have 2. And she says, how much do you love them? And he says, I love them beyond measure. With all my heart, I'd do anything. And she looks at him and says, multiply that times 10 million. And that is the love that pours to you from me today through the creative source of all that is. The I Am stands before you and knows your name. Dear Star Mother, why haven't you answered any of my questions? And she says, I have answered every single one. Because, sir, once you cognize the true love of God that I have taught for centuries here, you will realize it is inside you and that it loves you beyond measure, more than you love your children. Once you see that, and begin to understand it, once you start to live it, every single question you've asked will come forward. For it's the love of God that comes first, and all things are added unto it. All of the physics you ever wanted to know, all of the social questions that ever could be asked are there. And the wisdom that will come when you understand you're magnificent in the eyes of the One, the Creator Source. That's the message from the Pleiadian Mother to you today. And so you sit here on a node. If you haven't really paid attention to the explanation so far, this is a Pleiadian hotspot. You have 12 nodes and 12 nulls. And they were put here a long time ago. Basically with the beginning of the landings of the Pleiadians. And they were put here for one reason. In case this planet would cross that precession of the equinoxes and start an evolved consciousness, they would activate. The activations would not be all at once. And the pairs would be activated together. Now, we have described a push-pull energy. This is not really that hard to understand. If you understand magnetics at all, and if you can envision a magnetic engine that would rotate upon itself in such a way that it pushed and pulled both polarities so it always spun. This will be the future of energy. And that is the way the push-pull energy would work on the nodes and the nulls. They activate and the push-pull begins and it keeps them activated. But the nodes are the places where the Pleiadians worked and where the landings occurred. And what I want to tell you that may be interesting is that each one that has been listed, that you can read about, has always been sacred to humanity. It's not an accident. Even this one. We are in the base of the Rila Mountain, home of the White Brotherhood. This is a sacred place to many. If you could go back even further and even further, and if history allowed you to see, you would find that it was also sacred to those who came before these, and even those who came before those. So you find a sacredness that is felt on all of the nodes. Now the nodes and the nulls have also been described as time capsules. It's been given to you before, but I want to show you yet again. A time capsule is not as you have envisioned it. It opens at the right time. And what is occurring on the planet and has been occurring since the first choir is a slow opening of wisdom, knowledge, and sacredness put into a confluence of the field of this planet to increase the coherence of consciousness. You're starting to evolve, dear ones, if you haven't noticed it already. Society is changing in what they will and will not permit. Suddenly conspiracies are fewer. Suddenly the things that were always tolerated are no longer tolerated. Injustice, no longer tolerated. Inequality, no longer tolerated. Abuse, no longer tolerated. And we've told you before that there is more to come, and some things will startle you as you discover things that have been under the covers, as they would say, for a very long time, exposed finally. These are the things that are giveaways, as we say, to an advancing consciousness and evolvement on the planet. Things that have never happened before. There's those who would say, well, it's happening because of the internet. Oh, no, it is not. There are things that are indeed happening because of your internet. And we have discussed this before. Before the internet occurred, I said to you, there'd come a day when everyone will know everything and there can be no secrets. And that is the internet. But the internet did not create an advancing consciousness on the planet. It did not create a Me Too movement. The internet did not create those who would have integrity that never had before. It did not create some of the things that you're seeing today. Those are responsible for the nodes and the nulls that are opening on the planet. The choir is part of that because you perch yourself as best you can, as close as you can, to the nodes. And you sing the songs. Are there Pleiadians in the Rila? And the answer is, of course. Did you know some of them came here for you? You see, they move between the nodes. Can you feel any presence today that might be a little more sacred than you expected? Can you feel watched and loved? Can you see the smiles of the Star Mothers as they say, job well done? There's another node in this hemisphere, close to this latitude. It is Victory Peak in Kyrgyzstan. And That is the match that I give you now for the Rila Mountains. At the last choir, dear ones, I instructed the victory song. This is the result. Couldn't have been better. The victory speaks of victory over duality. It's a victory over an old energy planet that all it knew was an old consciousness of war. Victory that there has been an awakening. So great was the awakening that you passed right through the predictions of doom and gloom and Armageddon. And that's what you sing about now. Feels good, doesn't it? It should. Congratulations for capturing the full essence of the victory at hand. You're not the first in this galaxy to sing the song of victory. They vary. But victory over a low consciousness, victory over a duality that is skewed to the darkness is what we speak about. There have been thousands, if not tens of thousands, of planets with societies like yours that have gone through this. I told you before that some of them, including the Pleiadians, had a high technology so that they could go to other planets in their solar systems and populate them. But they did it before they had high consciousness. This is the problem with high technology with low consciousness. One of those planets that they civilized, they destroyed. They destroyed the kinds of things that you see on the screen that you say, this is an exciting Star Wars adventure. An adventure happened. Where do you think Lucas got it? He's a Pleiadian child, like some of you. The stories that he has, the imagination, comes right out of the galaxy. Some of you knew that. There have been other filmmakers who've tried their best to portray the life in the galaxy the way it is, but most have not. But what I want to tell you that the Pleiadian, more than any other that's close to you, knows what victory is. As consciousness starts to evolve, an interesting thing happens. Some of the knee-jerk reactions, some of the things that you think are human nature go away. You see, human nature has been described as something that never changes. If you take a look at the wisdom of even the poets, they call upon human nature as static, not understanding. It just never moved. You never saw it move. Therefore, human nature is something that is often ugly. It goes a certain way, often to the dark. You never realize that human nature is simply a product of your consciousness. And if you raise consciousness, human nature raises with it. It starts to change. So if you could use the word human nature, perhaps it'd be Pleiadian nature. In an old energy, it was just like yours, perhaps even worse, with higher technology and bigger weapons. The thing that happens with a higher consciousness, with the human nature that would raise, with the Pleiadian nature that would raise, is that you start understanding that weapons are not the answer. Honestly, you cannot look up to a higher level than you are. We have said this before. You can always look down. But you cannot look up to something you have not experienced. So when I tell you these things, you will say, I don't believe it, Kryon. There will come a day, and I've said it so many times, even in the choirs, because you're going to have a consciousness that would never kill another human being, that would never make weapons, especially the ones that are designed only to kill en masse. That is the definition of low consciousness. Imagine a population of billions who would never pick up a weapon for any reason. Imagine a consciousness without a Pentagon. Imagine a consciousness without weapon stores. That is where it goes, and that is where it has gone in planet after planet. How long will it take? And the answer is yes. That is up to you. That's the free choice over duality. The new kids on the block haven't been visited with an awareness yet. And what I mean by that is landing on the White House lawn. Oh, you've been visited. For hundreds of years, you've been visited. The photos of the ones in the skies are accurate. You've been visited. Why don't they land? Almost every human is aware of what happens when you go to the zoo. You go to the zoo and you see the dangerous animals. And here you are, an elegant, intelligent society, going to see the animals of the planet. And you approach the tiger cage. And the tiger looks at you and you look at it. And you're thankful that there are bars between you and it, because you know that when the tiger looks at you, all it wants to do is eat you. That's what's on the tiger's mind. So you're a little hesitant, are you not, to go into the cage with a tiger? They don't land because you're too dangerous. Did you get that? You're too dangerous. Like the tiger. Isn't it interesting that the consciousness of science fiction movies is almost always that the E.T. is here to hurt you? They're here to kill you, to steal your gold, to steal your water, to steal you, to eat you. Movie after movie after movie. That is the consciousness. Look to the skies and beware. They're here to invade you and hurt you. They want your planet. I have something to tell you. I've said it before. That is a reflection of you, because that's what you would do. That's not what an E.T. would do. You're too dangerous. Let me ask you, is this too far-fetched? Can you imagine what would happen to a craft if it tried to land on the White House lawn? Yeah, that's right. You're not ready. And so there will come a time, dear ones, when you are. And by that time, you will have the science and the wherewithal and the intuition to know they're all there. Perhaps there will come a time in generations to come where Yahweh will return yet again. And you will return yet again. Perhaps there will be an advanced choir of high consciousness where you sing songs to invite them to land on the White House lawn. Somehow I feel I've been relegated to the optional extras. It's okay. Yah-E sits to my left. Doctor, sit and enjoy some science. And then I will have the instructions, which will not surprise you. Difficult to know where to begin here, but we're going to tell you how to send a signal that has the language in it, not just the awakening. So I'm going to give you something to think about. And I hope scientists are listening so that they can roll their eyes and laugh a lot for a while. Dear ones, I want to give you an axiom of truth that you probably have not heard me say to this degree before. The universe, the galaxy, all it is, all of creation, everything you examine and look at, is filled with a signal. And the signal is how things work, and how you can make them work better, and how things are constructed. And it's always this. The axiom is this: look for numbers divisible by 4. And they are everywhere. In fact, I'm going to say this again and again. Even in this channel, the universe shouting at you, look at the 4s. And they want you to look at the 4s because within that, there are patterns of your new science. There are going to be patterns that will lead to other patterns. It will surprise you. Everywhere you look, there are numbers divided by 4. It is a natural occurrence. It occurs in navigation. It occurs in music. It occurs in magnetics. It occurs in electronics. All numbers that naturally fall divisible by 4. You know, when Yahweh went to school, in this life, he studied DNA. So what does the DNA tell you about structure? What about the nitrate bases? The nitrogen bases? How many are there? 4. What a coinky-dinky. That even biology is yelling 4 at you. You know, this is not the first time you've heard this, because there's a sacredness that comes with it. And if you take a look at some of the numbers in the past that have seemingly come out of nowhere, that represent things that are beautiful or wise or sacred, divide by 4. Tribes of Israel, Knights of the Round Table. Where did these things come from? The ancients knew it, and some of you still carry around the residual of it because you resisted going metric. The Americans here, look in your kitchen drawer for the ruler. Why are there 12 inches? Dividable by 4. Where did that come from? Why would you ever go there? Cooks, do you know what 1 cup is? 8 fluid ounces. And then if you want to know how many tablespoons and teaspoons, there's 24 or 48. All divisible by 4. Now that's not really scientific, but it's interesting, isn't it? That those numbers seem to float in. Of course, when you meant metric, you forced it into 10. So it would be easier. You have 5 fingers and 5 toes. Congratulations. And you obliterated the 4's pattern, because you won't get it with metric calculations. The 4's are yelling at you, dear ones, that this is the way that the universe works. You're here for music. Did you ever look at that? You realize the metric system couldn't do anything about music. It couldn't touch it. They also couldn't touch navigation. 360 degrees. That's Gaia. Gaia's in 4. The fractals of time are in 4. Music is in 4. How many steps are there, half steps, in 1 octave? 12. Dividable by 4. Isn't it interesting that those who decided to notate music originally, the ancients, decided they would use a system of quarter notes and measures. Quarter notes, do you get that? So then you have the notation of how many quarter notes there will be. The 2/4, the 4/4, the 7/8, still dividable by 4, the 5/4. It's all there. Music, dividable, divisible by 4. Did you ever consider that? Any of these things? There'll be some scientists listening that say, well, we're way beyond that now. We're into computing, you know. We have all of these computers. And these things are not necessarily then part of the system of the universe. We've created them. We'll have a challenge for you. Every single one here or listening. I want you to take out your camera and look at the chip and tell me what the number is. It'll be dividable by 4. If you're 512 or 32 or 64 or 128. That's where the electronics and the magnetics and the system falls naturally. Did you ever think about that? It doesn't fall into 5s or 10s. It's not metric. So every time you see a natural occurrence of where something will fall in its own way, it'll be dividable by 4. Your science isn't interested. Physics isn't really interested. And yet it yells at you, it's all dividable by 4. Here in Bulgaria, you plug into a circuit that just happens to be the number of volts that falls that way because of magnetic windings and because of electricity that is base 4. 220 volts. What a coincidence. Have you ever thought of these things? Everywhere you look. I'm going to give you one that will make every scientist and mathematician walk out of the room. Do you think the circle is important in the galaxy, in the universe? You think anybody uses a circle but you? And the answer is it's everywhere. It's the application of physics, the circle. There can't be anything, I think, more profound. And in that circle, in the geometry of that perfect circle, there has to be some wonderful relationships and ratios. You know where I'm going, don't you? Pi. 3 and a lot of numbers. Does that make sense to you? Do you think for a moment that that is the sacred number that belongs in that ratio? Now here's where it gets exciting for the mathematician, because I've heard them talk before, in front of me and behind me, when they say, dear Kryon, you're wrong. You see, a ratio is a ratio no matter how it's calculated. So you can say it's 4 or it's 10 or it's 12, and you can give us new math, but the ratio remains the same. 3 and an infinite number of numbers. All right. That's because you're not using relational math. Because you don't know what it is yet. You know concept. Because pi is 4. Now here is an example of something you're not going to understand. But I'm going to do it anyway. And it'll be the last thing before I give the assignment to Yair. Listen. What else is absolute like that ratio? What else on the planet never, ever varies? It is what it is. It will not vary. And it's time. How long is a second? It's absolute. It's standard. It is unchangeable. Atomic clocks are dividing it into the millionths of a second. It's used by physicists. A second is always a second. Except it isn't. Einstein came along and said, well, the second is a second for you, but it's not a second for another observer who might be going a little faster than you are. You see, his second is longer than your second. So which second is right? His or yours? Which ratio is right? His or yours? His second is longer. How can that be? Now we get into something you really won't understand. I will tell you something I haven't really mentioned before. Something to think about. And something the Yahi will understand fully. If a person is vibrating higher, go slow, my partner. If you have an ascended creature who has gone through an evolutionary process and is vibrating at a very high rate, vibration has no difference than speed. It simply is speed in a circle. A higher vibration creature or human being on this planet will have a longer second than you do. Are you aware of that? Let us say you had an agreement. Two human beings, and they're both going to live till 100 years. But one human being is vibrating faster than the other human being. He's more ascended. He's more alert. He's more aware. He's more evolved. So, you're going to die before him. And yet you're both going to die at 100. Does that make sense to you? Probably not. I've just redefined a second based upon enlightenment. Dear ones, I'll tell you that all of those listening right now who are vibrating higher than you are know that pi is 4. It's something to think about. Even though your scientists don't agree, haven't seen it, are not going there yet, don't know the math that's involved, isn't it interesting? Symphony orchestras tuning up to A440. What a coincidence. Don't you find it interesting that the sarcophaguses of early Egyptians are designed to resound at 440? Do you think maybe the Egyptians knew something you didn't? And the answer is yes. They knew about the patterns of 4. It's always been there for you to look at. Now you know it, because I just told you. Eventually your science will know it. And that is the signal. You're going to tell those who are listening to your tones that you know about the 4. And when they hear that, it won't be the baby awakening and crying. It'll be the baby waking up and saying, I know how things work. It will be the basis of new physics. It's going to be the basis of designer maths. It's going to be the basis of so many things. Look for numbers that divide by 4. Because that's the holy grail of the science to come. And the universe is shouting it. Just look at it. Look at how biology works. Look at how the earth works. Look at how Gaia works. 4. So in order to do that, Yahi, you're going to do something you've never done before. There's going to be one tone that you're going to have 4-part harmony. And you're going to do it 4 times. And that one tone that you're going to develop with 4-part harmony doesn't have to have 4 parts on all the notes. You can have 4 parts on some of the notes. But they have to be 4. Sung succinctly and accurately. You've never done it before. It's beyond the open fifth because that's the signal that you're moving on this planet from 3 to 4. And the tune, you just sang it. That's the one. And I want you to name it something for me. It's going to be the MT tone. And it doesn't stand for multidimensional tones. It stands for Miller time. And you named it. The celebration 4-part harmony, you're going to do it 4 times and develop it. I'm telling you, you've never had anything yet with 4 harmonies together in a tune designed that way. That's all it's going to be. The signal will be sent. We know about the 4. That's the language of the universe. It's the 4. In the last choir, that's the final signal that says not only have we awakened, but we know how things work, just like you do, because we know about the 4. And so it is.